Vedanta is a solution to our universal problem, which of course raises the two immediate first questions. What is Vedanta and what is our universal problem? Right? So first things first, the Vedas, from which Vedanta comes, and we'll explain all of this in due course, the Vedas are a means of knowledge. You always need a means of knowledge to know anything. All right, so the Vedas are a means of knowledge. We'll define what a means of knowledge is. And the universal problem that we all have is that we don't know our true selves. We're ignorant of who we actually are. So Vedanta is all about the knowledge mechanism needed in order to find out who we truly are. That's what study of Vedanta is all about. And it's great because it's the ultimate good subject. It's about me, all right? It's not about anything else. It's not about any other object, or I don't need to have any other knowledge about the outside world because the subject matter is going to be me, all right? And once I get discussed fully, I'll be able to evaluate it because I'm the world's best knowledge person on me. All right. And so Vedanta is therefore not a belief system. All right. You aren't told therefore it's not a religion. You aren't told that do it this way, follow these things, and you go to heaven, or things go right with you. Vedanta is really an exception to all of that. Vedanta says you're perfect. All right. You're perfect. The way you are, you're absolutely perfect. You don't need to do a single thing. All you need to do is come to know what that perfect self is. And Vedanta is the means of knowledge to do that. So, in order to do that, one has to learn. And the Vedas are therefore taught. They are taught, and the Vedas themselves are, if you like, a manual for life. The Vedas were written, they don't know when they were written. They think that at least 5,000 years ago. They were written down in Sanskrit. They were started to be written down about 3,500 years ago, as Sanskrit came from northwestern India into India, and it became a phonetic language that it could be written down in. Before that, it was a parampara tradition where a teacher passed it on verbally through the student, and the student then became the teacher and passed it on down. As a result, the Vedas are largely in the form of song, because it's easier to remember a song than it is to remember prose. And so it was actually just learnt. And even today, there are schools where they teach you the Vedas. The Vedas were really a huge collection, and not all of it has survived. Most of what we have is a collection of 4 collections, as in 4 Vedas. And each of these Vedas are therefore a manual for life. Now, when is a manual written? A manual is written by the manufacturer so that the user of the product can figure out how to use the product correctly. It's not written for the benefit of the manufacturer. It's written for the benefit of the user. What is the product in this case? It's us. It's our mind and body, right? Therefore, the Vedas are to be really taken as a manual of how to live our lives, right? How to find value within ourselves. So, and one of the first things that the Vedas teach us is how to learn. Because if you're going to have a manual, and the first page of the manual should say, this is how you're going to read the manual, how do you learn? And really, it's a very simple process. The first part is to listen. Listen intently. All right. Listen so intently that you could almost paraphrase what has been said back again. So you've got no problems in understanding what has been said. So this is the first stage, to listen intently. And this is where most people fall down. Because when we hear something, we immediately judge it based on opinion. What person, that person is saying something. Do I think that's true? No. I've read something that says that that's not true. All right? Or my belief is something different. The problem with that is that when you have an opinion, your opinion is based on what you know. You cannot have an opinion based on something you don't know. So if you judge something new based on what you already know and negate it, then you'll never learn anything new. Right? And the Vedas understood this. We're going to tell you things that you don't know about. There are lots of things you do know about. There's things you don't know about. And there's things that you don't even know that you don't know about. All right? This could come into that category, and therefore do not judge it on the opinion of what you know. You say, well, you know, what, you can maybe talking absolute rubbish. I mean, I'm sitting here and do I listen to absolute rubbish? And the idea is that you listen to something and you take it in fully, subject to future verification. Right? You're not being brainwashed into saying that this is the truth. You're listening to it intently, subject to future verification. It's as if you are all brilliant A-level math students and you come up to first year of university, good university at that, and head of mathematics comes up and he writes up E equals mc squared on the board. All right? So here's E, energy, and is related, and energy can't be touched or felt, related to mass, that is entirely physical, and it's all related by the speed of light. I mean, this seems absolute gobbledygook, right? You may have heard it mentioned before. Oh, I know that equation, all right? And you say, I have no idea whether that's true. But this is a competent teacher. I'm at a competent location. I'm going to accept it, subject to future verification. I'm hoping that by the time I spend my time here, I'll not only understand that equation, but be able to derive it. All right? So the first stage is to listen intently. Stage 2, and there's only 3 stages. Stage 2 is to analyze what has been said. Now that you know what's been said, is to analyze it fully. And the best way that you can analyze it is to question it, what has been said, and then when the questions are strong enough, you go to the teacher and say, excuse me, I don't understand that bit, or can you clarify that bit for me? All right? A full analysis until all doubts about the information presented has been eliminated. And the teacher doesn't care how many questions that takes, until you no longer have a doubt about what has been said. That analysis. And once you're sure you fully understand what has been said, and you know what has been said through stage 1, you go to stage 3, which is contemplation. Contemplation. And you sit down quietly, often in meditation, and you think about it deeply. And you say, is this my truth? Because the subject matter is such that you will be able to validate it. And so you are in a good position, without any other external influence, to be able to say, is this my truth? All right. Very simple. There's only a three-stage process to learning. And they lay it down. It's a manual after all. So in the beginning part of the manual, it tells you that this is how it does it. It also, the Vedas are designed for everyone. You think, oh, the Vedas must be intellectual stuff. No. It has to be designed, if you have a manual for the product, it has to apply to the product over its entire variety. And we have a whole situation where 99.9% of the population are materialistic, right? And therefore a large part of the Vedas are to do with how to live your life in a materialistic world, how to get the things that you've always wanted. The Vedas have a mantra for anything you could possibly want. Whether you want a better job, more money, a bigger house, better children, no children, more children. It's got absolutely everything. There's a mantra, there's a puja for you to be able to acquire any materialistic object you could possibly want. Better health, all right? Better in-laws, whatever it is that you've asked for, there's something in the Vedas that will do it, all right? And they know that by this way, you'll be able to live life correctly, the ideal manual of how to live your life, even in a materialistic world, even in a materialistic frame of mind, how to live your life. What happens though, for a minority of cases, people find, hang on a moment, I've followed this, all of this, right? I live a materialistic life, I have everything, but I'm still not happy. I'm still not happy. Now, we all understand what happiness is. There are moments in our life when we're deliriously happy, all right? A loved one, some event that you've wanted for absolutely ages has just happened. You look into a child's face and the child smiles. You listen to some music and you're lost in this piece of music. There are moments in your life where there is absolute joy within you. And chances are, at those moments, everything else has gone out of your mind. You're so engrossed into something. There is those moments of absolute joy. So we've tasted it. Right? And then we say, I want more of that. Why can't I have that always? All right? Because I've got all these materialistic things and I'm still not happy. You've come to the conclusion, and the Vedas say, the reason that material objects don't bring you happiness, and by the way, material objects can never give you happiness. You say, well, I love pistachio ice cream. That gives me happiness. There's clearly happiness in pistachio ice cream. Right? There is in one little scoop, but not in a gallon. So clearly the happiness is not in the pistachio ice cream. It just brings out the happiness that is within you. So people who have had all the materialistic things and then said, why aren't I happy? The Vedas analyze why. And the Vedas say, the reason you're not happy is because all material things have three fundamental defects. All material objects have three fundamental defects. One is they're associated with pain. Pain to acquire the object, pain to maintain the object, and pain for its loss. So there's that shiny red car you've always wanted, right? How many extra hours are you going to have to work in order to afford the deposit for that shiny red car? There's pain in it. And then you finally get it. Moment of euphoria, and you bring it back home. Now you've got to stop people bashing into it. You've got to stop the scratches on it. You've got to maintain it so that it's roadworthy. And for that, that'll take time and effort. There's pain involved in it. And heaven knows there's pain if it ever disappears. somebody steals it, or it's a write-off. All material objects have pain associated with it as the first defect. Right? The second defect is that it's limited. So when we acquire an object, we're absolutely euphoric when we acquire it, and then they suddenly bring out a newer model, which looks so much nicer than the model that I've currently got. All right? You cannot, because this is a finite world, you cannot have the means to buy every single motor car there is. So you'll always be limited to a subset of objects that you can acquire. There will always be more. And the more you have, the more you'll want. The better you'll want. All right? So it's limited in what you can do. The third defect of any object is that when you first acquire it, you are its master. All right? Because you own it. You went to the shop, you bought it. It is yours. You are the master. It is the slave. Until the moment that it breaks down. You bought a lovely air conditioning unit because the summers are getting hotter. Now you can sleep really, really well. You're the master. Flick of a remote control switch and the bedroom cools down. All right? Then suddenly a flick of a remote control switch and the thing doesn't turn on. Right? Suddenly you are sweltering in the heated bedroom. Now who is the master and who is the slave? So all material objects you start becoming the master of, but you end up being dependent on it. And you become its slave. So people turned around, the wise ones turned around and said, we can have all these material objects, but I want more. Is there something that can lead to permanent happiness, an object that's not associated with pain, that is not limited, and I do not become dependent upon it? And the Vedas say, yes, there is such a thing. You say, I want that. And they say, it's knowledge. It's the truth about yourself does not suffer from any of those consequences. You say, how do I get to that truth? And the Vedas themselves say, in order to go from a materialistic world to a world where you want to know, a spiritual world is a transition period. All right? And the Vedas, in the middle of the Vedas, they actually tell you how to transition. Knowledge is all about the mind, so the transition has to be a preparation of the mind. How do you prepare the mind ready for the knowledge? And this preparation is largely things like diminishing the ego, the role of the ego, truthful living, not being opinionated, right? There's a whole series, in fact 7 independent things, one of which is subdivided into another 6. These are all specified as to how to prepare the mind, right? The greatest of this preparation is what we know as karma yoga. Now, people think that karma yoga is where you go out and help out a good cause, right? And it's not. The only good cause that you're really helping out in karma yoga is yourself. Because what you're doing, you're looking at the actions that you're doing, karma, and you're saying, in a materialistic world, I largely perform actions in order to benefit myself. That's the only reason we perform actions, is to benefit ourselves. In fact, the actions themselves are derived from desire. Without a desire, you wouldn't perform an action, right? If you didn't have a desire to get out of bed, you wouldn't get out of bed. The action of getting out of bed would not happen. So in front of any particular action is a desire to perform that action. And after we perform the action, we evaluate. Was that a good action? By good action, we mean, was it of benefit to me? Right? How beneficial? Then the desire comes, oh, it was quite beneficial, but I can improve it further. And that leads to another action. It may have been something that you didn't enjoy. You say, I'm definitely not doing that again. All right? And therefore, the desire to improve yourself leads to another action. So it's desire, action, evaluation that leads to desire. And we're in this circle, right? All our lives, every single action we perform is as a result of wanting to fulfill a previous desire that we've had. And the beneficiary of all of that is largely ourselves. We stay in this cycle of life and then we die. We break the cycle at some stage, performing an action or thinking about it or whatever. Well, one part of this cycle, suddenly, poof, we're gone, right? And we'll talk about, in future classes, we'll talk about rebirth and karma and all those things, about what the systems are for that. So, karma yoga is to perform an action where by large the beneficiary is not you. That's what karma yoga is. You may have a benefit out of that action. In fact, your greatest benefit will be in feeling good about yourself. You may have a financial benefit. You may have all sorts of benefits. But you're largely doing it for the benefit of others. When you shift from performing actions that largely benefit you to largely benefit others, you are moving from a life of materialism to spiritualism. And the Vedas talk about this, that karma yoga gets you to a situation where you start doing the things that need to be done rather than doing the things that you want to do. Spend our entire lives doing the things that we want to do, right? And at some stage, when you come to a decision point of what action can be taken at this time, you often find different roads. This is what I want to do. This is what needs to be done. All right. And when you move away from what you want to do towards what needs to be done, irrespective of what the outcome might be to yourself, you're moving from a materialistic to a spiritual path. All right. What happens is that as you do this over and over again, you get to find that what needs to be done becomes what you want to do. All right? There is no separation. And you know that you are there. All right? That's what the spiritual path is trying to get you down. So karma yoga, therefore, are all of those actions that get you towards a position, gets your mind towards a position where it's now ready to receive some knowledge. All right. Prepares the mind. You're not doing things that are centric to yourself. And karma yoga, therefore, a lot of this karma yoga stage is a devotional stage, where you're not doing, your ego is not the primary motivator here. You've actually done things and put it up to, some people would say, God or universe or whatever, to say, I'm doing this because I think this needs to be done, whatever the result may be, but in my current state, I think this is what needs to be done. And you put it up to the universe. And if the universe thinks that's good and good things come out of it, you take that back as saying, thank you. All right. And so you have largely gone from the self-centric world to a God or nature-centric world. And the Vedas tell you how to go from this one stage to the other. And then the end of the Vedas, the Veda Anta. Anta means the end. So the Veda Anta is where the wisdom is. And these wisdom pieces are often known as the Upanishads. And there's 108 of them spread throughout largely the first 3 of the 4 Veda collections. There used to be 1,080, but the others have been lost in time, right? Because they were verbal. They were lost before they were written down and collected. And remember, in those days, that it was just scratched out on parchment, on leaves, and therefore a lot of them just turned into powder. And 108 Upanishads are in the Vedas. Out of the 108, we tend to only study about 10. Right. That's a relief, yes, that's right. And these 10 are studied because of somebody called Adi Shankara, who was an 8th century monk, brilliant man, because he'd studied all the Upanishads by the age of 8. And by the age of 16, he'd written countless books and a total analysis and commentary on on these 10 Upanishads, plus on the Bhagavad Gita and various other pieces of work by the time he was 16. Because he thought that's all he had in the world, until some great sage said, "You've done such great things, I grant you another 16 years of life." And Adi Shankara died at the age of 32 and has left behind the most fabulous commentaries and analysis on these Upanishads that we study to this day, right? Known as the Vashyas. So really, it's because if you read the Upanishads word by word, if you read the Bhagavad Gita as text, it's a nice story, but it actually makes very little sense. All right. The Upanishads are a detailed analysis of the wisdom of the Vedas, and they are there as a means of knowledge, of knowing the self, the truth about you. Okay? Everything clear so far? It's not difficult, it's not tricky yet. All right, so as I said, Vedanta therefore comes the combination of these two words, Veda, Anta, the end of the Vedas, because the first part of the Vedas are largely ritualistic to get you all the material goods that you want. It drifts off in the middle section of how to move from that materialism to spiritualism by preparing yourself, and then the end of the Vedas give the knowledge of who you really are. This is how the manual was written. In fact, it wasn't written at all. Right? It is said that the Vedas were heard. Right? Because if it was written, then it would be limited by the intelligence of the author. Right? The Vedas are said to be the manual for life, so its source is the universe, is this total energy itself, and therefore the Vedas are said to be heard, i.e. the great sages who meditated and got their minds to a very elevated level, effectively had this knowledge, pulled this knowledge into themselves and then translated it, said it initially, and then wrote it down using the language that they knew. All right. So this is heard, is not written. The Bhagavad Gita is written. That has an author. The Bhagavad Gita is effectively a diluted form of the Upanishads written down for the masses. And the Bhagavad Gita is to be taken in at three different levels. All right. At one level, it's just a good old story. The people coming along and all these warriors and they're and there's grandparents and parents and all this sort of thing. It's a lovely story that you can have. At a middle level, it's a sort of good versus bad. It's an ethical thing of what should or should not be done. But at a deeper level, it is the knowledge of the Upanishads. And it is an understanding of who you are. That's what Arjuna is being taught by Krishna. So the Bhagavad Gita, if you like, is at the lowest level of this teaching. The Upanishads sit in the middle. And there's another set called the Brahma Sutras, which are a deep analysis of the Upanishads. We won't go into those. Because they really they question almost every statement of the Upanishads and then discuss from various angles why these would be right or wrong. All right. And that's a deep dive analysis. And very few people would go into that. I mean, the Upanishads by themselves are quite a tricky thing to master. All right, but very few people would go into Brahma Sutra. So effectively, it's like Goldilocks. We've got the three stages of this Vedic information being made available to us. At the simplest level is the Bhagavad Gita, in the middle level is the Upanishads, and at the highest level is the Brahma Sutras. Okay? So the Vedas talk about, the Vedanta talks about preparation for knowledge. What is this knowledge that we talk about? This means of knowing, all right? When you think about it, anything that you come to know has got three aspects to it. One is the knower, that is typically you, because you come to know it. Second is the thing that is known, the object that is known. And the third is the means of knowing that object. So anything that you come to know about has these three aspects. So if you see the chair, all right, you are the knower, the chair is the known, and the means of knowing is sight. When you hear my voice, you're the knower, the words are what is known, and your means of knowing is hearing. All right? Perfectly easy. In fact, we cannot come to know anything without a means of knowing. And our means of knowing are largely limited to our five senses. All right? It's hearing, seeing, taste, touch. Touch is the one that's distributed throughout the body. The rest of it tends to be concentrated around the head. Right? These are our means of knowing with which we interact with the world. And when we interact with the world, these things gather this knowledge and present it to the mind. So at first, what seems to be is that we have a lot of things that are objects out there. So let's take vision for a start. Lots of things in this room. Right? Only one means of knowing, and there's only one knower, me. So what it distills down from the many to the one. And then inside your mind, you've got not only sight coming in, but you've got sound, you've got taste, smell and touch. All of those are coming in, many forms of input, but only the one, the knower, your mind then analyzes that. All right? So it has to be very clear to you that any knowledge that comes to you comes through a means of knowing. And you are the knower. All right? And Vedanta says the Vedas are a means of knowledge to find out who you are. You say, hang on a minute. So, in most cases, when I come to know something, I'm the subject. I come to know the chair, which is the object, and the means of knowing is eyesight. All right? Now, if you ask the question, who are you? You now need a means of knowing. All right? You say, well, this is me. The means of knowing is, what is my means of knowing? Well, I could say to you, do you exist? And you say, maybe. You either say yes or no. I mean, you either exist or you don't know that you exist, or there is something that knows whether you exist or not. And most people would say, yes, of course I exist. I'm here. How do you know that you exist? What is the means of knowing by which you know that you exist? Everything that you know has to be through a means of knowing. And there is the knower, there is the known, and there is the means of knowing. You know that you exist. What's the means of knowing? Who is the knower, and what is the known? Right? And the Vedas say that it is the means of knowing, is the body of knowledge through which you will come to know that who knows that you exist. When you say I exist, who knows that the I exists? All right, that's what makes it so difficult, because what we're trying to do is study the subject. With all our lives, we only study objects. In fact, that's the only thing we can study. We study objects, and suddenly Vedanta says, I'm going to teach you how to study the subject. Because I am the reference for everything else in the world. In fact, the world can be separated into very easily by the I and the not I. Because it's my life, I am the center of everything that happens. And therefore, in order to truly know what happens, how is it related to me, is the world an illusion? As some of these things that you hear from the Vedic worlds, is there a God? Is there not a God? How do I react to that? Right? Who am I really? Where did I come from? What's the point of it all? All of these questions are related to me, because you're centric to yourself, right? You cannot possibly answer them until you have a very good idea who I am. All right? It's like, as I say, it's like nailing a blancmange to a ceiling. I mean, the first nail is always the most tricky. Unless you can figure out who I am, you can't possibly figure out your relationship to every other object in the world. Right? We spend our entire life studying objects because we have no mechanism, no means of knowledge to actually look at anything that is not an object. And the Vedas systematically work through the mechanism of trying to understand who the subject is. There are various mechanisms, and we shall go through, in subsequent weeks, we shall go through some of them. Some of them is to figure out who we are not, in the hope that if you eliminate all the things that we're not, maybe we'll get to who we are. All right. There's various other techniques, splitting down the body, to say, most people would look at the mirror and say, this is me. All right, don't tell me who I am. I've been with myself all my life, right? I'm an expert on me. What you see in the mirror is what you get. This is me. And you say, all right, these are your legs. Yes, these are my legs. Means of knowing, well, I can touch them, all right? I can see them. That's a means of knowing, right? The legs are an object. Who's the subject? If the legs are you, then who thinks that the legs are you? Right? Who's the subject? Because you've just described an object to me, the legs, right? Through a means of knowing. And if you lost your legs in an accident, would you still be you? You say, yeah, I'll still be me, but I'll be legless. So the legs are obviously not me, because the I existence hasn't disappeared as a result of the legs going. So it's not a physical thing. And suddenly you look at the English that you've just used. I have legs, like I have a car, I have a table, I have a child, I have a wedding ring. All right? You have it. And then you say my. What do you use the word my for? It's things that you possess. You are the possessor, you are the owner. Whatever you possess is an object that you own. You can never be the same as the object that you own. You're never your car, or your child, or even something as close to you as a wedding ring. All right? These are things that you have, these that you possess. They are not you. And therefore, in subsequent weeks, we'll go through this mechanism of why we are not the body. And then it goes higher up. The problem is always higher up. It goes higher up and says, well, I may not be the body, but I think, therefore I am. Descartes said it must be true. Actually, towards the end of his life, he said, I am, therefore I think. He changed his mind. So we shall go through why it is that we think that we are the mind, because of the thinking process, and we'll apply those mechanisms to it also, to figure out why you may not be the mind. And then once you start to distill who you are, then you have to look at the world. What is the world? All right. And is it really the way that I think it is? Some teachers describe the world as an illusion. That's not true. The world is tangible, right? If it wasn't tangible, it would fall through this floor. It's transactional. It's clearly, it's here, I'm reacting with it, and any type of knowledge must be able to explain this world, just as it explains who I am. Otherwise, it's not complete. All right? And I have other questions. By the way, Vedanta says the world is fully there, it's tangible, it's material. It says it's just not real. All right? And the definition of reality in Vedanta is something that exists always, in all three parts of time, in the past, the present, and the future. Something that is permanent and always there is said to be real. Everything else is deemed to be real for a particular period of time. You have to put a caveat around it. All right? It's temporary. It's as though it's real. That's the definition that it applies. And then you get to the ultimate question: is there a God? Because you turn around and you see all of these things that are provided. You yourself, you've got two eyes but one nose. You've got two lungs but one liver. You did nothing to create that. All right? And the way that it functions now, right, it's a given. The fact that you're in this world breathing oxygen, you didn't put any of that. Every blade of grass that grows outside, we don't go around and make that grow. Everything that is around us is given. We're just a user of this thing. And so the question always arises, if everything is given, is there a giver? And Vedanta answers this question. And it answers the question with, yes, there is a giver, one and only giver, and that giver is you. That giver is you. So that's what makes it a really interesting subject, because the three fundamental problems that I had at the beginning was that I think I'm a limited being, all right, in this limited world, and I'm going to die soon. And Vedanta says, no, you're immortal, all right? The real you is immortal, and you're not limited in any manner at all. You are all you need to be. You are complete. So you get up and you have all these thoughts your entire life. You're this old, and suddenly Vedanta just wipes the legs away from underneath you and says, no, that's not true at all. Everything you currently believe is actually not true. And then you go to the materialistic world and you knock on wood and stone and things like this, says this is the real world, and Vedanta says no, it's not. Right? So these are fundamental thoughts that we have in life. And it turns around and it says, no, it's not. It's not real. And I can prove it. Vedas say, I can prove it. And I'll take you through the technique that proves that this world is not real. Right. And then ultimately it goes to the question of, I've been brought up to be a spiritual person, to be a religious person, that I believe in a higher order energy, the sun at the first level, but what creates the sun, this universal power, that's why we're all alive and doing things. I believe in all of this, and Vedanta then turns it on its head and says, yes, there is such a power, one encompassing power, unlimited in its potential, and that is you. Right. So there's a lot to get through, really. You go through all of your life thinking these three fundamental, and once you have these three sorted, there is nothing else in the world. If you get to know about yourself, the world, and your relationship to the world, and ultimately this ethereal thought that you had about God or universal energy, and your relation to God, and God's relation to you, once you sort out these three, it solves a lot of the fundamental problems, right? There's not much. I mean, ever since cavemen, they've all had the same questions. If it can sort all of these out from this one body of knowledge, that's what makes it such a fantastic piece to study. And it has to be studied. It has to be studied because once heard, it has to be analyzed, and that analysis comes through Q&A. All right, because you've got to repeatedly go to these things, because you're breaking down barriers that you've had your entire life, on thought patterns that you've had for your entire life, and a lot of these things just cut through all of that. So it's very, very important to go through this analysis, and that has to be done through a verbal exchange. It's always done in this way, right? You can have endless YouTube interactions, which are great to listen to, and they're full of great wisdom. But if you have questions, it's very difficult to then get them answered. That's why we thought we'll create this space. Whoever wants to come, whoever needs to come, will somehow find it. All right. And so as an experiment, we're doing it for the months of January, February. We're going to be here every Sunday morning, irrespective of who comes, all right, and to go through these ideas one by one. If it's successful, we'll pick up greater texts later. In March, we ourselves are going for a course in Rishikesh, where a Swami that we follow is doing a lovely course in Rishikesh for 10 days. So we'll take March out and do that. In fact, we take...
February.
Are you? All right. Right.
I'm actually, they've got the International Yoga Festival.
That's right.
Is that the other part of the...
No, that's not the World Yoga Festival. Yeah.
I'm actually going to see a teacher, John de Ruyter.
Right.
It's a 9-day workshop.
Yeah.
Okay, oh, that's great. So we have to go back and do because it's a constant learning process. You have to be steeped in it. So we shall be doing that in March. In fact, we're taking 10 people from here with us.
From the festival.
Yeah, we organized a group, the Vedanta Camp. So because this is a great teacher, we've been following for many years, but he never moves out of Chennai. And to us, he's probably the greatest Vedanta teacher in India.
What's his name?
Paramarthanandaji. Paramartha Nanda. And he is actually from Dayananda Saraswati, whose idea to do this festival. So Dayanandaji is senior student who lives in Chennai.
And he never leaves Chennai,
Yeah,
but he's coming to Rishikesh for the first time, and absolutely his class was absolutely booked out solid. We reserved a dozen places, so we're taking 10 people down, some of whom have never been to India before, some who got interested in this through the festival, and other members of our meditation group. So we're going and just spending 10 days in the sort of steeped in the ashram
But this
setting.
camp is other teachers also taking, and in Dayanandaji's ashram in Rishikesh. And so they're starting in early February or some middle February, and then they'll finish it.
Throughout February and March,
Yeah.
this ashram, Swami Dayananda Ashram in Rishikesh, runs sort of 10-day courses, almost back to back, a few days gap and then another 10. And it's all done in English by different teachers, February, March. It's a great time to just totally immerse yourself in it's residential. They house you, feed you, the whole lot.
Donation.
Yeah, all based on a donation. That's why we've also this teaching is considered to be priceless. All right. So it is by our tradition, the tradition that we come from through Swami Dayananda, we never charge for the teaching themselves. So it is always done by donation. So we have a donation box over on the table, and it's always done through donation because it's considered that people who benefit from it will contribute so that the teachers can be steeped in it and for the benefit of others that come down the line. And it's lasted like that for hundreds of years. We see no reason why it can't last that way for longer really. So it's done. We set up a foundation. It's a charity. The festival is also run as a charity. Festival has to have tickets because it has infrastructure costs of toilets and tents and all this sort of thing. But it's run as a charity, not to make a profit out of it. And any profits are plowed back into the system. So we're trying to do it in that way. We'll see how it goes. You have to try, right? And the enjoyment and the satisfaction is in the trying. In a materialistic world, you're always judged by the materialistic benefits that you get out of it. In a spiritual world, the greatest benefit is you having tried it. You get from the experience of doing it, irrespective of the outcome. And you have to you use the future for planning purposes, but not for anxiety. All right. Just as you use the past for the experience and not for the negative anxiety that it brings you from the past. So we always live in the present, use the future and the past, but only the good aspects of it, and then just go forward, whatever may happen. So that's the way we do it. Right, I've had my hour. You've been very patient, listened, so we can have questions, if you like, whatever, a bit of Q&A, and then we'll just shut down with a small little 5-minute guided meditation just to calm ourselves back down again, and then you'll be free to go out in the world. So any questions from what has been said?
The reality, the illusion.
The illusion.
And there seemed to be a contradiction there.
Yes, we can get you a glimpse of it, if you like. I mean, so for instance, let's say All right. Why does it say it's not real? Take any object. We're going to imagine I have a wooden table in front of me. All right. We call it wooden because to separate it from tables that are non-wooden. It could be a plastic table or a metal table. So we say a wooden table. All right. And you say, well, and you say, is it real? And you say, well, it seems real to me. You knock on it, you sit on it, you stand on it. It's a real table. All right. And I said, okay, but Vedanta says that every effect, and the table is an effect, has a cause. All right. The whole world is as a result of a cause and effect relationship. All right. So what is the cause of the wooden table? And you say, well, the cause of the wooden table, first of all, its material is wood. This wooden table must have been made from planks of wood, and then it must have had somebody who made it, say a carpenter. So there are two causes for every object, right? One is the material cause, which is the wood, and the other is the intelligent cause, the maker. So let's just take the maker out of it for the time being, just concentrate on the wood. All right. So the cause of the wooden table is the wood. All right. And you're saying that the table is solid and substantial. All right. And I say to you, you keep the table, I'll keep the wood. All right. That which you thought was solid and substantial and weighed 10 kilos, right, turns out to be just a word. A word for 10 kilos of wood that has been manipulated into something that looks like a table. Right? So where is this material thing that seemed absolutely solid, all right, realistic, transactional, all of those things, turns out to be a word as a description for wood rearranged. All right? And then you say the wood, is it substantial? You say, well, yeah, you can knock on wood, all right? But what is the cause of the wood? You say, well, it's fibers. Cellulose fibers make up wood. And you say, okay, you keep the wood, I'll keep the cellulose fibers. All right? And you realize that wood is just a reconstituted set of fibers, and we give a name. We call it a plank of wood, solid. In fact, in physics terms, any solid object is 99 and then 6 decimal places of 9s space. All right? Any solid object is 99.999999 space, yet we call it solid, dense, you can't go through it, all right? And then you go through the fibers and you say, it's made out of molecules. The molecules are made out of atoms, all right? And the atoms are made out of subatomic particles. And that goes down to energy. Is it really energy, or is there something that makes energy? Right? And Vedanta says there is a single underlying entity, underlying reality, which is the basis of all objects, including us. Right? And these objects seemingly have a structure and a presence in the world. Right? So that we can transact with it. So we give it a name, and we give names to certain shapes, correct? So it has a name and form. So the world is a series of names and forms so that we can have a relationship with it, right? But they all have a single underlying reality. And that single underlying reality is the same as our underlying reality. And that underlying reality in Vedanta is called Brahman. That's why the world is not an illusion, it's just not real.
Do you know, some of the physicists at CERN have been saying that They're obviously looking for the hadron, aren't they, which is this underlying particle.
Yeah.
Brian Cox suggested that they can't find it because there is only one.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
It's whizzing around being everywhere at once.
Yes.
In every atom.
Yeah.
What an amazing thought.
That's exactly that.
And it's exactly that.
It's exactly that.
Now, has he come at that through the Vedic texts?
Well, he's
Brian Cox actually went to a little bit of
Vedanta. Yeah, that's right.
I wonder, because they go hand in hand, that
Yeah,
what they're
they
finding
do.
out in physics now seems to be what the Vedic texts knew 5,000 years
I know.
ago.
I know. It's getting closer and closer and closer. Yeah.
Einstein or Vivekananda Einstein or
Yeah, I mean, even all of these great scientists, even they
Towards it, aren't
and they all in their time they actually went to the Vedas. I mean, Max Planck, Einstein, they all later in life they studied the Vedic
I
texts.
wonder if Teilhard de Chardin did. I'm not sure if he was able, because he was a Jesuit priest. So
I don't know.
probably-
In those early days, the translations also weren't there, and so it was very, very hard. In fact, this material was considered only suitable for such a small proportion of people that it was actually kept within the ashrams. It was never released to the outside world. It's only happened in the last 100 years or so.
Yeah,
especially over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So we are really in a privileged position, and Swamis like Swami Dayananda actually did it in English. And before him, Vivekananda went to America in the 19th century, late part of the 19th century, and started to put this information out in English, and that's how the world started to get to know.
There are I know at least one big sort of conference they do every year, which is combining science and spirituality.
Yes,
and having
yes.
speakers.
Science. Yeah.
Science and non-duality, yeah, that's right.
It's like they're all coming together, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the same with the table. Is that where semiotics comes from, the idea of semiotics?
Sorry, I don't know that.
So semiotics is philosophy, the idea of it's not a table, it's just a word, and the object is this size by this size and stands from here, and it's made from this type of wood from this person. And actually all of that history given to that word, it's just a word, but actually what it is you can never actually quite go into what it is.
Yeah, we have to give it a word, and we give it an incorrect word as well.
Yeah.
Because we say a wooden table. So the table is the noun, the wood is the adjective, all right? Because we want to describe the noun. The noun is always the substantive, and the adjective is the non-substantive. So when we say a tall man, man is the noun, that's obviously substantive, and tallness is an adjective, all right? So we say a wooden table, but actually, as we've just seen, the table is actually wood in the form of a table. So a better way to describe it would be tabley wood. Because the substantive element of it is the wood, is not the table. But because we have language like this, we bring ourselves to think that substantive is the noun, and in this case table is the noun, therefore we think that the table is solid, all right? Yet it has the same mass as the wood. In fact, it has no existence of its own. It is completely dependent on its underlying material. And something that has no existence of its own, because you cannot separate it. How can you talk about an existence of its own? You cannot have a table without the wood, right? And therefore, if it has no existence of its own, if it's entirely dependent, it's not substantive, it's not real. It cannot be. There's lots and lots like this. It's fabulous. I mean, I come from a scientific background, and I just love reading this material and trying to understand it, because I haven't found a flaw in it yet. And been doing it for years. And I have one of those minds, that quizzes everything trying to find a flaw, and you can't find a flaw in it. That's why it's not written. That's why it's not authored. Because if it's authored, every mind has a flaw in it somewhere. There is no flaw in the Vedas.
Are we going to read each of them and study each of them?
We've done in our group.
We've done in our group. We've done the Upanishads. So what we'll do is we'll do an introductory thing on these three aspects of ourselves, the world, and God, and discuss those in detail. And we'll see how where the group wants to take it.
Yeah.
The deeper you want to go, the deeper we can go.
Yeah.
So we've done about 8 Upanishads. 6, 7 Upanishads.
5, 6 Upanishads, and then other
texts in our group in Thatcham.
So last 8, 9 years. Sometimes it takes months
to one text.
I think I've got a penguin book of the Upanishads.
Yes.
But it takes, like we've done the Katha Upanishad.
For instance, Swami Ambikadananda has written a book on the Katha Upanishad.
Yes, we have that.
Right. Yeah, that's right. That's lovely. And so for instance, we could start on that, which would be quite nice. And you can see it from different aspects, different views. I've also what we tend to do in class is that we read text and listen to it. Listen to it from multiple sources. Then I create some notes from which I teach, and then I publish those notes for people. So Katha Upanishad has ended up with being 120 pages of PDF, where each verse is then explained and then analyzed. So we do 6 verses a day or something like that. So it depends exactly where this group wants to go, because this is led by a desire to know. We'll try it. So we'll do it for a couple of months. We'll see where we want to go. Take March as a break, and then regroup after that, as and when it needs to. All right.
Can I ask you about you're talking about the karma yoga.
Yeah.
So if you hear about people who go on long retreats for like months on end, and they're just meditating, is that self-centric doing that? So I understand that you're saying that the yoga, karma yoga, is like the transition period to receive the knowledge.
Yes. Karma yoga is for the preparation of the mind, and largely performed for the benefit of others, because that prepares the mind in the quickest manner. But if you're doing no harm, then you could easily sit and meditate somewhere. Meditation will not lead you to knowledge, right? Because when you meditate, you're limited by your mind, which is limited to what it already knows.
It just calms the mind.
Therefore, it calms the mind. It's in preparation for the knowledge to be brought unto you later. That's why meditation comes after pranayama, comes after asana.
Well, so the self-realization comes in stages.
That's right.
Understanding. So if people start to recognize the true nature, and then to meditate on that. So if somebody was to start meditating on that and just focus on that solely, will they get stuck?
Yeah, they will.
Not carrying on.
They will. So, self-realization comes through knowledge. That knowledge comes in through a means of knowing delivered by a teacher, right? If you just meditate, however long you meditate for, you're not going to get to self-realization. There's obviously there's been some huge exceptions, Ramana Maharshi, for instance, at a very early age, they get it all, but don't think that we are that exception. We just have to work very hard at it. And it comes through preparing the mind for the knowledge to come in, because this ignorance of who we are can only be eradicated by knowledge. Remember that ignorance has no beginning, but has an end. It has an end when the light of knowledge comes in. Once you come to know, you will forever know. So knowledge has a beginning but no end. So we stay in ignorance until we are taught. Once we are taught, we know that forever. So that teaching has to go in, but meditation during that time is important because that allows you to focus on it and make it stronger in terms of what you know and what you understand. This is about knowing. This is not a belief system.
But then if you know one thing, like when we get taught, and if we do sit down and do nitithyasana, that contemplation, that can be very beneficial.
That strengthens what you know.
Yeah.
All right, but it won't get you to learn to know anything new.
And when I've been when I spent time in India last year, there was karma yoga in ashrams, and it was in the form of, if you were first into the dining hall, people would go behind and serve the food. There was like a whole couple of hours in some dedicated to karma yoga. It was up to you. So some people cleaned the toilets, some people got all the rugs out and refolded them. So there was this time given for you to do something and act on it, but then they kind of talked through it and said, but whilst you're doing it, have this mindset whilst you're doing it, not sort of just whistling. You say be present with what you're doing and putting love into what you're doing and care.
Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Right, for the time being, it's fine.